You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying.
Hi, welcome to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. I'm Betsy.
Rebecca.
Ready?
And this month we are talking about Black Christmas from 1974. A horror film that is kind of infamous as being, like the sorority murder kind of thing, which if we describe it, here's how IMDb describes it. During their Christmas break, a group of sorority girls are stalked by a stranger. Yep, that's the film.
That's the plot.
There it is.
It's not a complicated film. This takes you. It's a what I would say classic 70s slasher film, because it's really the point of escalating and see what's going to be the next kill.
Yep.
Though to be fair, nobody was actually slashed in this one.
That's true.
There was one stab, possibly two stabs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But no slashing.
No, really. I mean,
it wasn't as gory as some of the later ones has been.
Not at all. Yeah. And they actually, that was a deliberate choice on their part. They actually thought it'd be more horrifying in a way to keep the killings a little more off camera. So you see the start of it kind of thing, but they don't actually go into the graphic of like slowly strangling somebody or repeatedly stabbing somebody. Like even in the scenes where people are stabbed and or gouged or whatever, they don't really show the stab. They show like something coming down, a thunk noise, and then the after effect later. So
I think that's an effective mechanism for horror, really. I don't think to be horror and to be good, I don't think you necessarily have to show all the gore, because then you're more focusing on the gore and not
the horror
actions of it. Yeah.
So also though, this is another one of the classic the calls coming from inside the house movies.
Call is coming from inside the house.
Yes. Which not positive, so anybody can correct me this. I think When a Stranger Calls was the first one, but I'm not sure if it actually predates this or not. But there's several that fell on this myth of the urban myth of the babysitter gets a call and ends up being somebody calling from the house and killing the babies and then her kind of thing.
I don't know if it is. I'd honestly have to check.
I see Betsy going, let's Google that right now. But
I'm on IMDb already. Hold on.
Cool. You do that, and I'm going to bring up another point. I don't know if y'all caught this, but at some point, one of the main characters, Jess, is on the phone with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend says, I love you. And she says, I know. And I would like to point out, this is 3 years before Star Wars. Yeah. So I wonder if Harrison Ford stole it from this movie.
Hey, he
doesn't credit it, but I'm wondering.
Or whoever wrote the screenplay. No. I don't know if that was an unscripted moment.
So from what I read, actually that was supposed to be Harrison Ford and came up with that as his response on his own. But I'm not sure if that's just true or not, or if that's what Harrison Ford just claimed.
No, he said originally it was supposed to be I love you too. And Harrison Ford's like, he would never say I love you too. It's not what Han Solo would say. And so he changed the line.
But Olivia Hussey did it first. Which, let's talk about it. So Olivia Hussey is the main character really in it, that she's got the most screen time. And she really was pretty prolific from like the late 60s in through. And she still was acting. I think she still is now, even. You might find her in a bit part here and there. But in the 70s and 80s, she was all over the place. And she was most known for Romeo and Juliet. I think it was 1968. I was
going to say, my husband said, I remember her for Tasteful Side Boob when I was in high school. I was like, wow, thank you for that, Seth.
As if for the most part, if you went to school in the 80s and 90s and they showed Romeo and Juliet, it was the movie she was in.
Yeah. Never liked Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, it's just
that's a talk.
Not my favorite Shakespeare play, because I think the irony is always lost in it. But it was a lovely rendition that they did. I mean, there was nothing shocking about it. It was very well acted and stuff. And
Okay, so apparently this was the first. This call is coming from inside the house film. A Stranger Calls didn't come out until 1979. So
well,
this
there you
was the
go.
very first one.
Excellent. It was also supposed to be loosely based off of real life murders that happened in Quebec around this time, but those murders ran from like October through December before they caught that serial killer. Another not so fun fact. This movie was supposed to have a TV release in 1978. And I think it was like January 15th of 1978, or January 28th is when it was supposed to happen. On January 15th, 2 female students from Florida State University were murdered by an assailant who broke into the sorority house where they lived, and 3 other young women were attacked and assaulted. We should have probably trigger warned, by the way. They do mention rape. There's assault. There's violence against women for sure.
Oh, there's violence against women, lots of it.
But so when this happened, 1 was Ted Bundy, who perpetrated those assaults and that murder. And 2, they took it off the air. They did not actually show it until I think later that year. I think they pushed it out to like May before they actually showed it.
I can see why they would have delayed it.
Yeah.
That is interesting and sad. Oh.
Yeah. And well, and they also kind of tried to blame this movie on it. I really don't think Ted Bundy needed inspiration. So
No.
he was not the first one also that came up with, assaulting and murdering women either. So
certainly not. And he needed no help. He was given all the help because he was like white and kind of good looking, at least average looking dude. So he was fine. He was fine. He didn't need movies to
inspire him. Yeah, he had his own.
No.
I have to say, in regards to the movie, one of the things I did find interesting was the way it was shot. It looked very voyeuristic.
Yeah, they purposely went with the murderer point of view for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think I read something where John Carpenter had used that a lot for his inspiration in Halloween.
Yes, I've read similar. So yeah. If this was not the first to do it, I think Peeping Tom might have been the first, and that was in the 60s. But it's really well done in this movie. Like the cameraman's work, the cameraman was also the body of the crazy murderer. So when you see like any kind of physical form of the body, that was the actual cameraman, which makes it kind of funnier because you have his point of view because he's the one with the camera, and it's actually him when you see hands or body or the eyeball. It's all that cameraman. So that's hilarious.
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, you get the camera and turned out there. And
it just occurred to me that you never really see the full murderer. No, you don't know what he looked like at all. Like literally, I watched that movie and I'm like, I just realized we never saw his full face. We don't know what he looks like. Oh, that's a great.
You never get a story either.
I love that. No, as far as you know, he's just some creepy pervert who lives in a sorority house.
Yeah. Though apparently at some point, I think it was Roy Moore. He did write a treatment with a backstory. And he had a plan at some point to like do a sequel or follow up that either was supposed to be the originals or whatever, but there wasn't. And so, to be clear, in case you haven't seen this movie yet, which you may not have, you might have seen one of the 2 remakes, but the crazy killer is a non-entity in a lot of ways. Like there is no backstory given for him. There is no setup to him being there in the 1974 one. The only setup you see is like the creepy killer point of view, scoping out the sorority house, climbing up a trellis and getting into the attic. And that's all that's his intro. You don't ever see him as pointed out. You see parts of him enough to know that the person that they actually decide is the killer in the end is not. but yeah, you don't get anything more than that. But when the other premise is the fact that he's making these phone calls. And here's the thing. I don't know, what do you ladies think? So my thought was the first phone call, the first obscene phone call you get, I think that was just frat boys because it's similar, but doesn't quite sound the same. Like, because the theme in that one is straight up, I want to lick your cunt. I want, suck my big fat cock, heavy breathing. Right. There's like some giggling. It does end with, I will kill you, but it's not the same commentary you get later after the murder starts. So I always wondered if that was supposed to be they're getting all these obscene phone calls. It's probably just silly ass frat boys being stupid and gross. And then you get these murder ones, or if it really was supposed to be him all along. I never really
could be an illustration of the disintegration that goes on.
It's the
process of the crimes.
Yeah, at first it's just sexual, and then he goes and loses it completely. That's definitely could be a progression for sure. But it's hard to tell, and they don't help you. You just have to make your own decision on it.
No, they really do just like drop you straight into things. There's no preamble. At the end, there's no wrap up. It's just and the ending, mind you, is left very open to interpretation. So it's a very snapshot of a couple days in the sorority house.
Oh yeah, so back to something we said earlier. So Roy Moore was the writer. Roy Moore, for some reason, I just want to slur that together. But Bob Clark, the director, he was the one who came up with it. Let's not be graphic with the kills. Let's keep it back and toned down so you see subtle on the screen. And I think Roy Moore didn't like that at first, but then when he saw it, he was like, yeah, this is much better. So, and just to add more to that, sorry for jumping around as I usually do. I apologize. But another guy. So the obscene calls didn't drive you nuts. Like, it's almost like what we were talking about a little earlier, where like logically you're like, why the fuck would you keep this on the line? And also, here's the thing too, like, you don't really hear about calls like this. Just doesn't happen with cell phones and caller ID. It's not saying that it's impossible, but it's not so much of a thing anymore. It's unsolicited dick pics and DMs, but you don't really have so much the heavy breather on the phone anymore. But it really was a thing, like up and through, I'd say like maybe the early 2000s. Though they had kind of faded out by then. By the time caller ID came in, they really kind of faded out. But
I think they faded out 90s-ish.
I was gonna say, once you could star 69 and find out who just called you, it kind of went away.
Yeah. So I know kids, you couldn't star 69 in the day. There was no caller ID.
No, this was the time when, like, and for the sorority house, there was the one phone that everybody used.
Mm-hmm. We had the fact that there was a second line.
Star 69 on your regular phone, not like your house phone. If you star 69, it would tell you the phone number that just called you. I'm explaining to children because they have no freaking clue what star 69 is.
I didn't think about that.
Good point. And actually, we always thought it was funny that it was star 69. We're not going to
lie.
Yeah. Star 69, is that code? No, actually it was to try to find it. It was not hollering at your boy. It was
hollering at your boy.
Wait, kids don't say that anymore either, do they?
I don't know. Oh, man. I am 40 something. 41.
I have no idea what the kids stuff. Where, I mean, this is why it's kind of fun being Gen X, because even stuff that predated you caught on late night TV and old movies and stuff like that, so you knew it.
And like Godfrey up all night movies.
Yeah, or even classic TCM movies and stuff like that. Like, I mean, this is literally coming out of party lines still. The fact that they even had like the possibility of a word for an exchange, so which is another funny part of this movie. So they're worried about one of their sorority sisters who had gone missing. And they're at the police station, and they have this.
To them has been killed.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes, she was suffocated, dragged into the attic, put in the rocking chair.
The first murder because a girl was mean to her.
Yeah, that she was alone. Mm-hmm. But they're in the police station. The most inept cop you've ever run into in your life. Seemingly in this movie. He, was basically not even taking them seriously. Like, she's just off with her boyfriend. The girl's dad's there. She, was supposed to meet her and take her home. And this cop's just like, no, she's just off for the weekend with her boyfriend. I'm like, yeah, nothing to worry about. But when he finally is like, yeah, just give me your number. We'll call you back later. The one amazingly hilarious character.
The mouthy one.
Yeah. Gives him the number of fellatio, like 9880, which only makes sense. Well, one obviously is a fake number because you all know what fellatio is. And two, only makes sense that there would be a word in front of it instead of just numeric digits, because at that time they still had exchanges that were prefixed with like a random word, like,
Right.
Hollywood 678, or, word
Right.
X 554. So like it was
A lot
part
of
of the
times it
actual
was
number.
the township or whatever that you were in, but you could also set up one of your own if you had a business or whatever.
But yeah.
The
What
old
did y'all think
days.
about Barb? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's the old days of telephones.
For sure.
Yeah, that
Barb,
predates
which
us.
one?
Barb was Margot Kidder.
She
Margot
was
Kidder was Lois Lane in the original sequel. Well, not the original, in the
she's the
1980 Superman
alcoholic.
movie.
Which
The
She's the drinker.
alcoholic.
the
Barb, yeah, the alcoholic, the one that upset Claire, that made her go upstairs in the first place, the one that talked on the phone and was, mouthing back to the first crank call. That was Barb.
the one
Yeah.
who
One who
was
called her mom a
talking about
gold-plated whore.
yeah. Oh, that was a great line. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I loved that line so much.
One,
Yeah.
that opening scene, Margot Kidder to me, has never looked prettier than she looked. And that opening scene with that choker on and the men's shirt and her hair up in the like chignon, and I was like, that is a fucking good look. I want to do that look. It's so simple, and she looked amazing.
Cinderella had fucked the prince at the ball and threw his shirt on afterward, but her hair and makeup was still real good. It was amazing.
I was like, that is a
Yeah.
look, and I am in for it, girl. Yeah, she looked amazing. She was drunk. It was great.
The character, it was, I mean, definitely falls in the classic trope, because you see her at dinner with everyone, and like this is after the girl has disappeared and her father's there and the house mother is there, and she is just pulling out these random facts about these animals having sex for days and this and that.
Turtles, in fact. And it's true. Sea turtles can't have sex for 3 days.
Yeah. And she's going on and on about anything sex related. And you're just watching it and you're like, oh yeah, she dies. She definitely is not the final girl.
Of course not, yeah. Which is funny. So actually that character was supposed to originally be bisexual, but they just changed it because they thought it was too much for the audience at the time.
There's
like, we don't need to drive that home.
Honestly, there is so much kind of subversion in this, like, that I did not necessarily expect from I mean, it makes sense for a 1974 pick, considering that it was like sexual revolution era, but it was a little more, they had a lot more agency than I expected going into it. They were all very independent, all like obviously kind of sleeping around, drinking around, doing their thing, whatever. We have the entire plot line with Olivia Hussey that we haven't even gotten into yet. That was so much more than I expected from a movie from this time, but it was welcome. I'm like, hey, let's.
Well, this is another thing. So if you notice, none of these girls are overly played up as the whore. Like, they're just, the makeup's not crazy. The outfits are, I don't want to say conservative, but they're not like you would see in modern day slasher films where they're wearing short skirts and like, crop tops and stuff. And this was done deliberately because they wanted it to be like, they didn't want it to be like a blame the woman kind of thing. They just wanted to be like, these are your average college students running around and just getting attacked, which is strangely woke for the time. Like, I don't think that they had that in mind. That's just what they wanted to do. So like, for the horror of it, like, just, this could happen to anybody, but the end result, I think, is a little more woke than you would expect.
Yeah, I mean, truly, because I didn't think of any of them as like, usually you have the horror character and you have, the like virgin character, and there was none of that. These just were like normal girls. You could see these girls going out. I would have gone out with these girls. Like, they were just cool girls, which was kind of nice. It was a nice change from what I'm kind of used to seeing in a slasher flick, where they very much play into stereotypes. None of these girls was really a stereotype. They all had kind of interesting, we don't learn a whole lot about them, but all of them were interesting characters.
I mean, if you wanted to, you could pick out, like, you could say, okay, Claire was kind of the virgin trope, but there was complexity beyond it. It was like, when you went into Claire's room, her dad was shocked because there's the old woman with the took her out. There was the peace symbol made out of two bodies, that were naked. And, so she clearly was not the typical virgin type. And then, like, you could call Barb the whore type, but even so, she still doesn't really come across as that. They don't show her jumping on men or, slurping cock neck left and right, nothing like that. You just see that actually what she comes across of is drunk and damaged. They set the scene very well with that phone call with her mother, where her mom basically just says, "Oh, are you coming for Christmas? Oh, well, don't."
Yeah.
You're off with my boyfriend. You could just go find something to do.
Really?
Yeah, the girl has issues, but it's much like you said, they're not making it over the top. I don't think.
Yeah, like, at no point do you watch this movie and go, "Well, that girl's a slut, she's gonna get it." Like, you do watch this movie and go, "Well, she's alone, she's gonna get it," and you also know that they're all probably gonna die, but it's not like the same way where you're watching like Friday the 13th and that one's smoking weed, that one's humping her, none of that. It's just not like that.
It doesn't feel like moral judgment. It's just these women just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. What about the whole storyline with Jess and her boyfriend?
Fabulous. Well, here's the funny thing. Like, you think that would have been deliberate because, so this is 1974 where this movie comes out. Roe versus Wade got passed in 1973. Here we are 50 years later and it's fucking revoked, but we'll go.
Yeah.
But when I was reading through the trivia, they weren't actually trying to make a feminist commentary. They just threw it into a plot because it was sort of like a topic of the day kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm like, I can't even imagine that. Like, it seems like they're saying that it really wasn't supposed to be a feminist subplot, but it's a fucking feminist subplot, whether or not they intended to.
The boyfriend is very much like, "You're not going to get an abortion. I'm going to stop my program and we're going to get married." And he's like calling in all these shots. And she's like, no. These are my decisions and I have made them.
I don't want to get married. If I wanted to get married, then fine, but I don't want to. I want to travel and I want to live my life, and that means no babies. And so go die in a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I was wanting him to get killed by the slasher.
I was happier that she did it. That she killed him, honestly. I mean, I wanted him to die regardless. I didn't care how the fuck he died, but the fact that it ended up being that he had made her feel so unsafe with his behavior and his activity that he ended up causing his own death via himself.
More lesson there, guys. Yes. And you think, and you can imagine, you have at first, you could have seen very easily where the boyfriend, you could imagine him as the killer because he's of his pushy behavior, his misogynistic behavior with Jess. The incident where he decides to smash up the piano. Now, let me tell you this: a grand piano is tens of thousands of dollars, even in the 1970s.
Yes.
So in today's market, you might be looking at $100,000.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So,
I thought it was interesting the way that it ended up playing out with him, like the police suspecting him.
Yeah, because he's clearly got kind of for violence and control.
But to me, I'm like, one, I already know it's not him. We know who the murderer is, so we as the viewer know it can't be him. But also, me as the viewer, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense, police officer, with everything that's happening. But they're literally not putting together that all these women who are missing have anything to do with the calls, with anything. And I'm like, oh, it's because the police are inept. Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
So I'd argue one point. I would say that you could, so you don't actually see enough of the killer until well after Peter is suspected, that's the boyfriend's name, to know that it's not him. I will say that there's some logic reasons why he's not the best candidate, but you could make a case for why they would think it was him. Because if you think about it, like, she hasn't seen him for like 3 days, they point out in that first phone call. He could have been calling and harassing them if he wanted to. They don't show you who it is that's looking around the house and crawling up. It could have been somebody who was familiar with the sorority house to begin with. when you hear that the call's been coming from inside the house, it's a good case for when he creeps down the stairs, when she finally reports the obscene calls, that he could have been in the dorm or the sorority mom's room and called. So you could make a case for it. It's obviously not him when you see the killers, you see like this much of the killer, because the eyes are completely different fucking color. The face looks, that contour of the face is completely different. But to be fair, I could see where they went that way with it, but we always feel that we know it's not it. Like if you watch the movie, you don't really get they set him up well in the story, but from an outsider perspective, it never really does seem like it would be him. Yeah. But the story does point it towards him sometimes.
I can see where it points it towards. Although, again, why would he kill all the rest of her sorority sisters when he could just get rid of her?
Kill her. Yeah, I think the whole point was supposed to be the cop theory of it was he was unhinged. So, and that's why the story didn't make sense. Because first of all, you have this high school girl that's killed. There's no reason why this seems like a connection to Peter at all. Then that this guy doesn't find out about her being pregnant until after the first murder has happened.
Right.
Now, the cops could have figured that out too had they ever found the first two. Well, actually, the first two murders, because there was the girl in the park and then Claire. But yeah, so like the logic of the theory that I guess the cop had is he was unhinged beforehand and started killing people and then got more unhinged. That's why it's stupid.
Got super unhinged.
We as the viewer are privy to more information than the characters are. So, and just we know how movies and plot works. We know like it's too obvious that it could be the boyfriend, so we know that it's not.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. So as a viewer, you never suspect it, but like I said, you can have a little understanding where the cops are coming from. But when you put it all together, it made no sense. But back to your point about how like connecting the obscene calls to the stuff, to the murders and things, it is funny because one, they never reported the phone calls until like after the third murder, I think. Now Barb might have still been alive. So it might just be after the first two. No, third, because the house mother was dead by then. So it was at least the third murder.
Okay.
And actually, Barb and Phyllis might have been dead at the point. So it might have been after the fifth murder. I don't remember the timeline so much. No, Phyllis was still alive for sure. Sorry. Because she talks to her later. So Jess, Olivia Hussey's character, finally calls the cops and is like, look, we're getting these obscene phone calls, which twice the cop puts her on hold. It's the same inept cop from the opening when they first go report Claire missing. And he's like, yeah, we'll get to it. We get to it. Repeats out loud the address where she says it from, and it happens to be that Claire's father, Claire's boyfriend, and Phil are at the police station. And it's Claire's father who hears the address and walks up, and they look at the thing and they're like, obscene call, same house my daughter lives in. She's missing. Go into the lieutenant, played by John Saxon, by the way, which we have to call out. So John Saxon, you might know, depending on how much of a horror fan you are, also played a sheriff or played a policeman. He actually was a sheriff in Nightmare on Elm Street and was the father of Nancy in that movie. So a little bit of typecasting. But yeah, so he puts it, he's like, hey, Nash, that was the sergeant's name, who's just like the dumbbell. It's like, do you think maybe you might want to, same house the girl goes missing from, seen phone calls at the same house, maybe connected there? And to be fair, that's when they get on the ball. So they assign an undercover to be sitting outside the sorority. They bring in a person to tap the phone to trace the calls, which, go ahead, I see.
Yeah, it's so classic. Yeah, we have to keep them on the line for so long. And and I'm just like, oh, no. And all of their efforts obviously are ineffective because they're just not taking it seriously enough, I think. Because obviously they don't know the fact that there's two dead bodies sitting in the attic. And when somebody is missing,
but they did know the girl in the park was found dead, which is why I think they started taking it serious. Betsy?
All right. I won't blame the cops for a lot of things. I won't. But what I will blame them for is not searching the whole sorority house once more than one girl goes missing.
Yeah. Would you not check the attic?
You should have been searching that whole house. The whole house. Top to bottom. And then you would have found the dude. but nobody ever searches that house. They just are like, we'll tap your phone lines. There's nothing we can do. 15 girls are missing and they're all in the walls.
Well, to be fair, they only knew the one girl was missing still. They didn't know the house mom was missing because they thought she went away. They didn't know that Barb and Phil had died because that was like close to the end. And so they knew the high school girl, which they didn't necessarily connect to. They assumed it was the same killer, but is not in fact connected to the sorority house, right? So they knew that girl was dead, and they knew the sorority girl was missing. Still should have fucking searched the house, but they didn't. Especially when they get the calls coming from the house, which again is towards the end, but they never go. You're right, they never do. No. Doesn't happen.
To the point of at the end of the film, they still haven't searched the damn house.
And the killer's still there.
That house.
When are they going to figure this out? When it's in the middle of summer and the bodies are stinking?
So I was reading about this because it's interesting too. And there's things I never thought. So the implication when you watch it through the end. So spoiler, obviously. At the end, the last woman standing is Jess, Olivia Hussey. Barb gets killed. She gets stabbed by a glass unicorn. Phil gets killed when she goes to check on Barb. And then that's it. You just have Jess, Olivia Hussey left. And then she gets a call from Nash, whose job is supposed to be just tell her to walk out the door and get out of the house. Don't tell her, specifically is what the lieutenant tells her, don't tell her that the call's coming from the house. Just tell her to walk out the front door. Now, two things going on here. Nash, we know, is inept. And Nash does try, but instead of like being like, look, we just need you to go talk to the cop out front or coming up with something, just to explain why she just needs to walk out and do this right now. He says he panics and tells her the truth, which is the call's coming from the house. Now, her being, a good sister, she's like, well, fuck, I'm going to get Barb and Phil out of the house. Also makes her a moron because she screamed their names several times and nobody responded.
At that point, you should.
I don't know that I'd have been that good of a sister. I'd be like, I called, you bitches ain't hearing me. You're either dead or you're going to be soon because I'm the fuck out this house.
Right? Yeah. Yep.
But not Jess. She goes upstairs.
I'm not going back for you.
Yeah. Like, if I called your name and your ass didn't come, you're dead as far as I'm concerned. I love you, Rebecca. I love you, Betsy. But you best respond when I scream. If you don't, I'm assuming you're dead already.
If I don't assume I'm dead already.
Yes. And you have my permission as well. If you've called my name several times and I haven't responded, I'm dead. Get your ass out the house. In fact, if you don't even want to try to call my name because you want to get your ass out of a scary situation, get your ass out of the scary situation.
I was just get out the house and then send the cops in a minute. They're going to be there in a minute. Send them in a minute.
But nope, she goes upstairs, and that's the one time you get a flash of the face of what is being affectionately called Billy, the killer. He's never really named. They just call him Billy because when he does the phone calls, he says stuff about Billy and Agnes, and there's all this crazy shit. And and does several voices. But you see, like I said, you see like this. This is what you get through cracking the door, and he's like, yes, don't tell them, Agnes, don't tell them. And Jess, first of all, let's give her some props. She did grab a fire poker. She wasn't going up unarmed. Did about dick with the fire poker. But here's the other funny thing. She tries to open the door and there's something behind it and she can't get it open, right? At first she shoves her shoulder into it. And I'm like, yeah, the first time there's resistance and I can't get in. Nope. I mean, again, we've already pointed out my ass wouldn't have gone up the stairs to begin with, but
here's what it is. It's either somebody dead against it or the guy. Killer. I'm out.
Yeah. I'd like to think that I wouldn't go upstairs, but I might have a white girl moment.
Well, sure, we already pointed out there's some stuff we do that is just stupid and we know it. Like we hear gunshots, we know we should take cover and not, but we open the door, look out the window instead to see what's going on. This is shit that happens. You know better and you just do it. So this might be something that happens to any one of us where we know better, but we're like, let me just go look.
I'm gonna pet the bear,
Yeah.
I'm gonna pet the bear because it's cute
and fuzzy. That's perfectly reasonable. But she shoves the door into Billy. She makes a run for it. Billy grabs her by the hair, pulls her back. She makes a run into the cellar because she can't get the front door open. Doesn't think to run for the back door, but okay, whatever. We're in a panic. Got it. She gets into the basement. Here's where it gets weird, though. Suddenly, so when you see this much, you see clearly a brown eye and like the face shape is very It's very distinct, but you can see the eye orbit and stuff. So you have a general idea of what this part of this person's face looks like and that their eyes are brown. So
Yes.
anyway, she's now in the basement and her boyfriend starts creeping around the house, which, he had called again earlier crying on the phone about don't kill the baby and, weird shit. How so and she was like, just tell me where you are, and he wouldn't respond. So the assumption would be that he calmed down a little and was coming to harass / talk to her again about the situation. But he's like knows to be creeping around the basement, which is weird to me. Like, how does he know that she's in the basement at this point? This is a weird, like,
I thought it was him breaking into the house via the basement window.
well, he was, but he was calling around her name first. He did break into the basement.
Yeah.
But prior to him breaking that window, and he's like, Jess, are you down there? Calling in through the
That's
window.
true. Why would he think she's in the basement?
Yeah, why would he ever think she was in the basement? Why? She literally never went in the basement.
Door first, like there's a lot of this makes no sense. But yeah, but he for some reason thinks she's in the basement. He's right, but we don't know why he had this thought. And then he breaks in the window, comes in, he's calling out her name. She's shivering, hiding because she at this point thinks it might be him for sure. Like, she was thinking it wasn't him when they first told her,
Yeah,
because
she's like,
she knew
definitely not him.
well, because it was in the house when she got the same phone call, and at this time they're thinking the calls are not from inside the house. And when she finds out that the calls are from inside the house, and he was in the house when she got the call, she's freaking out at this point. But yeah, so he comes close to her. She's hiding. She's out. You hear her scream. Then the cops come down later, and she's in shock, holding the fire poker, and her boyfriend's dead across her with the bump in the head. But here's the thing, folks: the boyfriend's got blue eyes. Distinctly not the killer that was in the room. To be fair to poor Jess, she is obviously in panic mode, has been harassed by her boyfriend all day, knows he has a temper. I mean, I'm sure that the piano incident was not the first time something like that happened. Not saying that he beat her, but he crushed for sure, the ornament in front of her. And so she knows he's capable of violence. Whether or not he directed it straight at her, questionable. But so not faulting her for just being like hitting him with the poker.
Her reactions completely make sense.
But obviously was not the killer. She's in shock the whole time for the rest of the movie. She's lying in her bed. They probably sedated her with something. Who knows?
They did. Actually, the doctor was like, oh, she's not going to be cognizant until like tomorrow. Oh.
But they leave her in the house. They don't take her to a hospital.
It feels like. I don't.
Well, you see two people on the porch at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You notice that? But they leave her alone in it, and but there's people at the house, if that makes sense, like out at the front of it. Like,
I wasn't sure about that because I watched it last week. I'd have to go back and double check.
I was gonna say the lieutenant vaguely said something about staying with her until she woke up. So I think the plan was at least to keep an eye on her, like be downstairs and leave her alone in the bedroom or whatever. But
they definitely leave the room for sure.
Yes.
And it looks like that they might actually be sitting out front of the house afterwards, because they're also, some of them are taking the dad of Claire to the hospital because he's in shock. The boyfriend of Claire also leaves. But then the funny thing is, so it ends with you hear a phone call ringing again, and you keep in mind that after the first murder, this guy is calling consistently after he kills somebody. So the implication you can get from this is that he just killed Jess and is calling the house again.
Which,
but nobody's inside to answer the phone.
Answer.
Yeah, and they do make mention about searching the house later. I think there's some mention in the conversation in the bedroom, like, thoroughly go through the whole house or something like that. But it's like,
you mean like they should have done it first place? Yeah.
Before you leave that poor girl in her bedroom,
sedated, defenseless.
Why wouldn't you take her to a hospital?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's all of it's very weird.
I would think that would be automatic to take to the hospital.
Right? Because she's been abused in some way. I mean, even if it's just
definitely
to be on
shock
watch.
at the very least.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, make shock sound like it's nothing, but actually your body is kind of shutting down. So shock's kind of serious.
No, shock is not nothing. Like, you can go into serious shock. Like, and it can really
Which
mess you
ironically,
up.
they're taking the dad to the hospital for shock, and they're like leaving her there, like, she's fine.
Oh, just give her a sedative. She'll be okay.
But I will say this movie still holds up though. Like even with like the weird strangeness of like, exchanges before the phone number and the tracing of the call manually through these circuits and stuff, which is hilarious on so many levels. It holds though. I mean, is it the scariest thing in the world? No, but it's really well done. The point of view, filming, the even the thought behind doing the obscene call. So those scenes where you have any of the women, like either as a group or individually listening to the obscene calls, they're actually not hearing anything because they actually they dubbed in the obscene calls later. And the idea was because they just wanted an effective numb, which was genius because that's kind of what happens when you get calls and things like that. You just kind of numb at first and then you react as you're going to react. Sometimes you're stupid and you're Barb and you like kind of egg them on and pick on them. Sometimes you just freeze with the phone to your ear. If you're really smart, you just fucking hang up the phone. I shouldn't say smart. If you're really able to process it at that time, you would just hang up the phone.
Yeah. My mom worked for Victoria's Secret in the 90s, in the call center where she would take orders, and she got obscene phone calls constantly.
I can imagine.
Constantly. And so there was one guy who would call in and he would be like, I want to suck your toes. So he called, I want to suck your toes. My mom hung up. He called back, was like, your toes sound really suckable. And my mom's like, you've already called me. And he hung up. But she would mess with them all the time because they were constantly coming in. And you could report them, but
yeah, and actually at the time, I know it sounds bad, but when you used to get them, you just kind of blew them off because it just happened, and like really reporting them was almost futile.
It was very much like in the movie, well, they're just, just don't pick up the phone or what have you.
Just hang up the phone. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, because they weren't going to do anything about that.
I was going to say,
it's a lot like how they treat stalking.
No, the only way they would do anything is if it became real weird, like threatening weird, and even then, you're lucky if they did anything.
Yeah, they might put a trace on the line, but
it'd be like you trying to report a dick pic.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
it's the telephone equivalent of it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
which
like
it's seemingly frivolous, but they're not. I mean, like, it's not frivolous. This is a threat. This is a person trying to impose themselves on you, but it was never taken seriously by almost anybody. Like, and you were programmed yourself to not take it seriously, much like you're programmed not to take a dick pic seriously. You're like, whatever. You're all sharing on social media. Look, this is this person's dick. Isn't that sad? I mean, like, it's bad that we're so numb to it because we deal with such cat calls.
We deal with it all the time, so much.
Yeah. So that was the sad reality of that. But
yeah, I too felt the movie held up fairly well. I was entertained pretty much the whole way through. I mean, it is not top cinema, but it is a decent little film. Yeah, it's a fun little film.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was my first time watching it. I'd heard a lot about it, because several podcasts that I listen to have talked about it. So I'd heard a lot about it, but I had never watched it. And I'm like, honestly, this is a pretty good watch. I'm not sad that I sat and watched it. It was worth my time to sit and watch the film. Margot Kidder was on the ball. She was great. Olivia Hussey was great for what she was doing, which was being, a girl in a horror movie. She was very like believable as someone who was very, very frightened. And it made me want to cut my hair off because he grabbed her by her hair when she was running by. And I was like, yeah, I honestly liked all the girls. Like I said, I liked every single girl that they talked to. There were some hilarious moments, like when they were tracing the call and they go through this room that is full of what is one single computer. Because it was 1974. So I know that was all of one computer.
You see like the things like you see physically what happens when the line is followed. Like you see these exchanges and the wires and the cords and everything. It's so funny. Yep. It's amazing. Like it's hard to believe.
Used to be what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, it was great.
Kind of a sad fact. So originally John Saxon was not going to be Lieutenant Fuller. It was going to be an actor named Edmund O'Brien, and he was really prolific through like the 40s, 50s, 60s. And he was signed on for it and everything. He showed up at the airport in a wheelchair, was suffering from Alzheimer's, I don't want to say the very beginning of it, but enough into it where it was early enough where he was still functioning, but enough into it where he would have gaps in memory. And they still were going to thought about having him do it, but his physical health was not that great either. And it was freezing cold in Canada when they were filming it. And they Bob Clark and Roy Moore were really distraught over this because they were heartbroken that they had to tell this guy that we can't have, it's too dangerous. And poor Edmund, he cried when he heard. And I think he did one other film, maybe, but 74 was the last year that he acted.
That breaks my heart.
So it was very sad about that. The upside is John Saxon was available, and I think he is excellent in the role. He brings a nice amount of humor and seriousness to it, but yeah, I mean, it's a really sad story. And honestly, I hadn't really known much about Edmund O'Brien. I looked through like his filmography, and he was in a lot of thrillers and like detective, like noir type films and stuff. And
fun.
So I'm sure he could have brought something great to the role had he been more capable of doing it. But yeah, sadly, I think he died 4 years later. So 4 or 5 years later. So that's kind of a sad bit there. Weird fun facts. Apparently, this was Elvis Presley's favorite horror movie, and he would watch it every Christmas. Of course, every Christmas for him was only 3 years because I believe he died in 77, right?
Something like that.
So there's that. Another weird fact. At one point, Olivia Hussey was up for the title role in Roxanne, the Steve Martin movie, and Steve Martin met her, and he said that she was in one of his all-time favorite films, and she thought that he was talking about Romeo and Juliet. Turned out it was Black Christmas, which she was surprised. So this was not a box office success, but they did make a profit on it. So it was a fairly cheap film to shoot, and then it didn't have like great acclaim, but it got enough people.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of locations to deal with because mostly you have the house, the police station, the phone bit, and like a short stint at the hockey rink.
Yep, and that was like a university hockey rink, and the extras in it were the university hockey players.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it looked like a lot of it was like shot on the college, honestly, because the computer room could have also been on a college campus.
In the house they actually bought and refurbished a little. It apparently was run down and abandoned wreck, but they really loved the staircase and the way they can get creepy angle shots and stuff. And I think it worked really well.
Yeah. It felt a little claustrophobic in that, but I think that adds to you are in the house with them.
Yeah.
This is also kind of funny. So when it released in the US, it was the title, they changed it originally to Silent Night, Evil Night, because the American distributor was afraid that the title Black Christmas would sound like a blaxploitation film, like Blackula or along those lines.
Oh no.
But it got a terrible response to that title, so they flipped it back to Black Christmas and people came in. Not that Silent Night, Evil Night is a bad title, but it's interesting what they thought about Black Christmas, and I can see where they were going.
I can totally see when you had like Black Dynamite, Black, all those like blaxploitation things coming out, and then they'd like Black Christmas, and people are like, "There's no Black people in this Christmas."
Not if there's no Black Jesus and no Black Santa Claus. Oh, that's another thing I want to put: Santa Claus. When they have the underprivileged children, this scene is just crazy. So there's the boyfriend of Phyllis, and who's played by Andrea Martin, which is a fabulous actress, and she's still going today, by the way.
She is still going.
Yeah.
Love seeing her.
This scene, it's Margot Kidder and whoever the actor was, it didn't really stick in my brain, who played Phyllis's boyfriend, and he was hoping to go away with Phyllis for the weekend, have a fun old night of debauchery. And instead, Phyllis is going to go with Barb on a ski trip because Barb's mom threw her over, right? So he's dressed as Santa with kids on his lap, saying like, calling calling Barb a bitch. And he goes, ho, 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 fuck. Kids are just like, yeah, whatever. And then like Margot Kidder's Barb's like, isn't Santa naughty? And it's just fucking hilarious. And then this scene continues later on. They keep like flashing back to it, like Claire's dad's there, and there's Barb, Margot Kidder, pouring champagne down this child's throat. And she's drunk off her ass too. She's like, look, he schnockered it. And they're like, but no, please stop feeding the child alcohol. Like,
Yeah.
there's apparently no actual supervision for these poor, like, underprivileged children. There's not like a den mother with them or anything. It's just this drunk college kids getting the kids drunk. And it's so fucked up. And I don't know why, but it's one of the funniest scenes of the movie for me. And I think it's fucking
It's because we
hilarious.
know that would definitely happen. It's the one real part that can happen.
Well, that and a crazy stalker killing a bunch of people.
Well, yeah.
Sadly, that can happen too. But
unfortunately.
But yeah, it's just very funny. Another thing to note, just in general, this has had 2 spinoffs since. I think it's 2. One in 2006, which is directly just a remake of this one. But Andrea Martin, who played Phyllis in the 74 one, she plays the house mom in the 2006 one.
Nice.
And
I may have to go back and watch the 2006 one because I haven't.
It's not bad. I mean, it's not great, but what they do with it, like I said, this is basically the same story. They give more background to Billy. Is really what the difference is for the most part, and it's obviously updated because it's 2006 and not 1974. So they don't really do a good job of like how they updated the scene calls in it at all, in my opinion, because it should have been much more easy. But they play with the little, so they use cell phones, and they like one of the dead person's cell phones calls coming from that, and they distract and they do try to keep the accidental feminist subplot sort of in there as well. So where 1974, it was abortion and a guy trying to tell a woman what she could or couldn't do with her body. In the 2006 one, it takes a root in the basically revenge porn.
I see.
Where a girl finds out that her boyfriend had filmed them having sex, and probably several other women, and it got leaked. But they don't make a big, it's very small subplot, but it's in there. They mention it, and he also still in a creepy boyfriend is in there. Like, so it's pretty much straight. Well, I don't want to say straight copy, but it's an updated version.
Yeah.
The 2019 remake is something completely special.
I've heard that the 2019 was just radically different, and that maybe it just shares the name.
Yes and no. I mean, there are similarities. You still have a sorority house. You have them being stalked, but they go further with it. They take the feminist subplot and they make it the plot. It's no longer just a subplot. They bring to the full front the shit that women have to deal with. So like it starts out basically, you have the sorority. You have, instead of phone calls, it's DMs, and the DM account is a spoofed account that's like named after the founder of the college. You have the main character. She was attacked at a fraternity, and of course nobody believed her, and there's all this other shit going on. And they have a really great scene where like they are at the actual frat house where it happened, and they're doing a little Christmas show, and they do a song that at first sounds like they're just like, oh, sex is fun, and then they're like, I got attacked, and then they start going after like frat boys in this little song and calling out the fact that this happened, that this woman was assaulted there. So it's really neat, but it gets a little weird in the end, so it doesn't make it just be about this one sorority house they have, or this one fraternity. He's basically going after all women, and it's a role where you will fucking almost hate Carrie Elways because of the role he plays in this.
Wow.
By the way, just FYI on that, he plays a professor that is obviously like of the incel alpha male mindset, where like women's role is subordinate, and the back is supposed to be supporting men, and that the fact that they're taking over is a threat to manhood in general. And that's kind of like the whole plot of this fraternity, the fact that these the women are standing up and calling out women assaulted, saying that, maybe we shouldn't have the statue of a founder who was like, a rapist out on the quad. Maybe we should, like anything like that. It's an affront to the manhood. And that is where it goes. And it's opposed to where you either have everyone die and the final girl just barely making out, you have the entirety like of the sororities band together with the survivors and go kick the ass of the fraternity boys. Lock them in the house and burn them down. So
I like it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to like about that remake. It doesn't hold true to the original one exactly, no, but it does still pull off the theme of it enough where you could still recognize that it's Black Christmas. But they definitely completely update it, and they, instead of having a subplot that's feminist, it is the forefront. So
I like it. I will probably end up watching both of those. One because Andrea Martin, and two because that one sounds really interesting. So I'll probably watch both of those.
I mean, it gets a little cheesy with black magic and stuff like that, so don't have your expectations high. But
I never have my expectations high with just like slasher type flicks, because they are not exactly complicated cinema.
Generally,
go ahead, Betsy.
Generally going into films like this, I'm like, if it has any plot at all, hooray for them, we did it.
It's a little bit like watching a porn,
Yes.
That's all I really care about. We're not looking for plot.
Yeah, I was going to say, and honestly, if there's too much plot, sometimes you're like, I literally don't know what's happening here, and you've given me too much plot, and now I'm thinking too much. And guys, yeah, there are two things that can have too much plot: slasher movies and porn.
Yeah.
You mean like
there's that catharsis as a result?
You mean like the movie from last time that we shall not name?
That wasn't even plot as an issue. That was just a mess.
That was more than too much plot. That was
a good way. Yeah. Was a contributing factor.
It was a contributing factor. It was too much plot and too little logic, I think.
No connection between the plot. Yeah. But
until somebody tells you what the connections are, because you're like, I didn't pick up any of these connections. Okay.
Another thing to note about the 2019 one, Black Christmas, is also that you do have a kind of like how, you might have felt betrayed when you found out that women actually voted for fucking Trump. There is definitely a moment like that in the 2019 Black Christmas as well. So complicit in our own demise for sure.
It definitely happens.
Yeah.
It definitely happens. I've had people say things to me and I'm like,
yeah. It's are you listening to yourself talk?
Do you know what that means when you no, okay. Yeah. We've met them, we know them. They hurt our brains.
I don't understand. Yeah. We've all had it.
Yeah. But at any rate, it's a great movie. Honestly, I
really liked it. Really liked it.
I think if you're looking especially. Oh, sorry, Betsy. I thought you were done.
I was going to say, especially coming off of the back of last month's movie, man, we needed this. Wow, did we need this film? This was the film we needed. It was good. It had feminist subplot. It was based around a whole lot of women. Like this is what we needed to break up from the chaos that was last month's movie. This is what is a good palate cleanser to say, no, there are good films. There are good ones. This is why we do this.
Yes, I needed to sit down and it's a good solid film. I definitely will recommend it. I'm surprised this one is not a cult following.
It is. It does. Yeah. It has a huge cult following for sure. Yeah. Yeah, not to take away, but I'm like, if you look it up, it's like it's got a cult following. Like that's one of the through lines you find about, like when you read about it, they're like, yeah, big cult following.
And I can totally see it because I think it's a great, solid slasher flick. Like, well, horror thriller. Like we said, there's not much slashing in the traditional of like blood and guts and somebody taking it through the neck. You see a little bit of blood, but more of it is like the silent horror of the unknown and what's happening in your own home.
The horror of the unseen, it's closer than you think.
Yeah, like you're not even safe in your house. That kind of horror. Which,
Yes.
as a woman, you kind of feel that a lot. Like, am I safe in my own damn house? Like, so then like all these women being like preyed upon in their home, it's trigger. It's trigger. Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
and then the naivety of it is kind of cute too. Like they make a mention of it, like after the two members of the search party show up at the back door and scare the shit out of Andrea Martin's character. They note the fact that they, aside from the door that they had locked, which was the kitchen door, they did not lock or any of the doors or windows in the entire house because it just they felt safe there, and turned out they were not. And to be honest, I'm a neurotic person. I lock everything all the time. I'll be sitting in my front room, my front door's locked.
Oh, my doors are always locked. I know I probably should check my windows.
Mine are locked, I know. Like I just know they're locked.
Because I've watched too much true crime where the bad person is trying a door and it happens to be unlocked, and then there goes bad things. So lock your fucking door.
it is.
Sorry, I thought you guys would love this. So Mrs. Mack, the house mom, the role was originally offered to Betty Davis.
Oh,
And nothing against the actress that did it. I forgot her name, but because she was lovely in that role. She was fucking hilarious. But could you imagine Betty Davis in that role?
I would have
just swanning. Oh,
she would have stolen every scene she was in.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, though, she did end up, Betty Davis and Olivia Hussey did end up working together in Death on the Nile 1978, that version of it, which, by the way, that version has a stellar cast. So if you're bored and want to watch something besides horror and want to watch murder instead, that's not horror related. It's playing free on several things. So, which also Black Christmas 1974 is currently streaming free on several platforms. And if you have Shudder, it's on it as well. So
that's where I watched it.
Oh, you'll probably like this, Betsy. That fur coat that Claire's boyfriend wears, that actually belonged to the actor, Art Hindle. It's his own coat, and he still has it. As of the last interview he did. It's like, yeah, that was mine. So it was so low budget that a lot of the outfits you see the people wearing was their own clothes. So, and that coat specifically was one of it. It's a big furry coat. He looks like he's wearing a bear skin. It's so funny and cute. I kind of want that coat. I'm not going to lie. But
honestly, a lot of the clothes, I was like, these could be just their clothes because it was a lot of like just shirts and like sweaters and stuff. I'm like, that totally would make sense if they just came onto the set wearing that.
Yeah, just dress like a normal person. There you go.
Yep. But yeah, I just particularly love that coat. I had a feeling that Betsy probably did too. So.
I did. In fact, I'm pretty sure I was like, oh.
And another person of note that almost was in this movie but wasn't was Gilda Radner. So she was going to be Phyllis. And ended up, I think, was it Saturday Night Live? The commitment to that was too much. So she ended up dropping out like a month before filming began. So, but and then the guy who played Peter, like, so I'm not a huge 2001: A Space Odyssey fan, probably because I have not rewatched it as an adult, but as a child, it bored the shit out of me. It was too slow, and I just couldn't keep attention to it.
As an adult, it has bored the shit out of me, and so as an adult, I have tried to watch it and can't ever get past the opening segments. And I fall asleep or I get bored and walk away and do something else. I've literally never been able to make it through that film.
I have never watched it.
But this film is very well known. We're obviously not having great taste to watch it because we like this stuff. But the guy who played Peter starred in 2001: Space Odyssey.
Can I watch all of these? Yes, I can. Can I watch 2001: A Space Odyssey? No.
But it's funny, like that was the one person where the director went after. He wanted this guy to be in the movie. But the funny thing is, so Art Hindle, the guy who played Claire's boyfriend with the bearskin, well, not actually bearskin, but the fur jacket that looks like bearskin. Yeah. They met him later after they'd already cast. I think the guy's name is Care Dulia or something like that from 2000. So Art Hindle's this other actor. They met him later, wanted him in the film, and Art Hindle's like, I really would have loved to have played Peter. And they're like, man, I totally would have cast you as Peter had I met you first, because I still wanted Caradullia in the film, but I didn't care what he played in it. But I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that actor's name. I apologize. He does excellent as Peter. I don't want to take away from him. Like he pulls off
good job.
very well. Like if I met him today, I'd probably still slap him for being Peter. So he does excellent, and I don't know how well Art Hindle would have done at it. Like I think he does fine in what he does, but it's so owned by the actor who played Peter that I can't imagine Art Hindle in it instead. You know,
it's one of those roles that the person who they did have do it just nailed the performance so well. You're like, no, they don't need to cast somebody else. They don't need to redo that one.
Oh, Rebecca, back to your point. So I looked up the trivia about it. So as we put out, this is the quote from IMDb. It says the film only had moderate box office success and the negative critical reception when originally released. However, the film went on to have a large cult following. It has since received a critical reevaluation, is now considered a classic.
There you go.
So some things age well. I'm not one of those things, but this movie is.
I was gonna say, but I can totally see where when it first came out, especially like 1974, like it was kind of, it wasn't in the heyday of this type of genre. That actually came a little bit later. So I can see where this, because it predated like Halloween and even, When a Stranger Calls, which we were talking about earlier, all of this type of film, and it was kind of a standalone. It would take revisiting it now that we see what this genre becomes and is, to go, wait a minute, this is a really good precursor to what these things would be, and I know there are a lot of people who draw from Black Christmas, like horror directors who draw from Black Christmas because it was one of the first films that they saw that was in that style.
Yeah, sometimes it's like when you evaluate it as a standalone, you're not going to really get the whole picture, but when you put it within the context, of that whole subgenre, I think that really helps. It gives it a framework. It puts it in a relationship that allows you to take a little more meaning, I think, from it.
Yeah, I mean, watching it today, I'm looking at and I'm like, oh, I can see like little bits of like, oh, I bet they use this in this film, and I bet this, I can see where this would have, led to this in this film, and different things like that, like, and little homages. Like I was paying attention to like her being in the rocking chair and it kind of rocking. And I was like, that's obviously a Psycho, like just a tiny nod to Psycho, even if they didn't mean it. It is. It is. Like there are little things like that in there that I was like, I can totally see where, that wasn't something that people did yet, but because the biggest of the horror movies hadn't come out yet. The horror renaissance hadn't happened yet, where everybody was going to the theater and being scared to crap. So
yeah, just had a few precursors and then boom.
And then it hit.
It seems like it's art without the pretension. Like you don't know that it's art when you're looking at it, but it is when you see what's going on with the camera and the cutting and the way they've done it. The only thing where I felt that it failed a little with the cinematography, and this is probably just a choice they made that I found confusing. So when that search is happening and that girl screams, they have cut back from the window where there's Claire dead in the rocking chair and Mrs. Mack hanging, swinging a little. So it kind of like the point of view I got, it kind of looked like I thought the girl had seen in the window, like had walked up close enough and seen it. And that's what she was screaming about. So it confused me for a minute because of that. So that was the one thing where I thought that was a poor choice of shooting it that way, because it didn't add to the horror of the moment. It took away from it because you didn't understand that this woman was actually looking at a dead body on the ground.
I can see that. I can see where that would have been an issue.
Yeah, it was a tad confusing because I was like, did I miss something? When they were like, oh, she found a girl. And I was like, another girl? I agree. I kind of thought she found Claire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think they were showing you, I think what they were trying to show you is that she hadn't found Claire. There's someone else.
Yeah, that's exactly what they meant to show. It was supposed to be that other woman whose high school daughter had gone missing. Yeah. that was her body. But and again, I respect the choice not to show a slaughtered body of a high school girl for sure. But the fact that they had done that visual that way made you not understand the perspective of the actress who was screaming. Like you just had no idea. Like also, like, she wasn't even looking down. I don't think she was like kind of looking out, which would have made a little more sense if her eye line was somewhere else. Like
right.
It's
yeah,
like
if she'd
my
have
only
been looking
criticism.
down screaming, but
everything else was amazing. I mean, the way they did the point of view from the killer, as Rebecca pointed out, was just really excellently done. I mean, I don't know if it was because the tech was so low that the guy was, because he probably was a rather heavy handheld camera that he was doing. So you get this bounciness and this blurry vision, like that really gives you the perspective, like as you're walking down the stairs, when you turn your head, how things go out of focus for a minute. It's completely like that. So you really do feel like you might actually be the killer walking around the house. It really puts you in that moment. In a way, I don't think modern technology quite does, because it's too clear a vision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because like if you're doing something and you turn your head like this, there's going to be a moment where you can't see. And they got that. Like there's a moment where you're a little blurry until you refocus. But with modern technology, they do that turn and they are clear the whole way because it's modern technology and the cameras are really good. And it's also like mounted. I think it was like some dude turning with a camera, not like a mounted camera that he could turn. So it's especially for what you think they were probably working with, which was not much. Incredible what they did with what little they had and how little money they had. And I think that was another choice that they were smart in not showing all of the gore, because I'm going to guess that if they had, it would have looked real cheesy. Really cheesy. It would have been really bad. And so the choice not to show a lot of the slashing and the stabbing and stuff, I think probably saved this film, because I think if they had shown it on the budget that they had, it would have come across as like bad, just bad, just a bad film.
It's going to add more time. It adds more money. It adds more personnel to the film.
Yes.
To more staff, more crew, and they would have had to cut corners. It would have not have been Tom Savini for sure.
Yeah,
certainly not.
And to be honest, I love Tom Savini, but his early work was very cheesy.
Yeah. Well, I remember.
And a lot of that had to do with the materials he had at the time. Don't take me wrong, because Tom Savini is amazing and was amazing even earlier in the day. But like the stuff they had, like he came up with Better Blood and all that stuff, but also like the materials were not quite.
But this was time of him developing these things and trying to figure out how to make it look more realistic. He didn't come in with that. This is stuff that he developed over time
for sure
himself.
So this would have looked like early Tom Savini at best, And it would have looked like, I can imagine, and they wouldn't have had the money even to hire Tom Savini, even in 1974 with their budget. So it'd have been like catch up, Jeremy.
You're like, hey, I can see the Heinz bottle right there. Come on, guys.
I believe famously in Psycho, because they did do it in black and white, the blood is actually chocolate syrup.
Yeah,
I think it was chocolate syrup.
Yes, it was chocolate syrup. It was Hershey's chocolate syrup. Because it tasted good and it looked more like blood going down the drain and stuff than the fake stuff that they had. So they used chocolate syrup because they didn't have to worry about the color.
If I had been Janet Leigh, I'd have been like,
hang on, I missed the spot.
This is why they don't let us act in things.
Yeah.
What happened to my blood? She looked it up. Smeared on my face like a 4-year-old that just stuck their face in a chocolate cake.
Talk about continuity errors.
Oh, another kind of funny fact. So as I noted, I shouldn't say, so the actresses were not reacting to nothing when there was obscene, but it was very mild and it was spoken by the director, and it was like not as obscene or crazy as what you hear in the movie. It was more like a guy going, yes, I want you, please now, thank you. It was more along those kind of bland sort of lines, so that you could have this numb effect. But when it was released in the UK, they actually cut out some of the obscene. The word cunt was too offensive for the UK, apparently, which I find funny.
Where it would have been cut for the British censors at the time.
Yeah, so they did cut out cunt, that you couldn't say that. I don't know what they would have replaced it with. Sorry?
Now today in America, people would be like, oh, absolutely not that word. But if you did it in the UK, they'd be like, yeah, because it's all over there.
Weird flip in the world, yeah.
UK, Australia, big time.
Yeah, UK, Australia. Yeah. They'll actually call their friends that. Like, nah, yeah, cunt.
Apparently, though, in the 70s was huge taboo. I don't know. And it might have just been more of like a prude of the censorship than the prude of people, for sure.
Well, I mean,
I would
censorship is wild.
So. But final thoughts, ladies?
I enjoyed it. It's a good, like I said, it's a good solid film. I don't think you would regret watching it. So
No,
give it a crack.
no. Watch this film. It is fun. It is I mean, is it scary? Kinda. It implies scariness. Is it the scariest film I've ever watched? Absolutely not. Did I have a great time watching it? Absolutely. It was a good slashery type romp.
So mine, just want to reiterate this one point that I brought up earlier because I found the actual written thing about it. So the strict rule that Clark had set for himself when it came to writing the female characters was to never objectify them sexually or give them nude scenes. He wanted the college girls to come off as real people and not disposable horror characters waiting to die. And that kind of sums up, I think, why this plays so well and why I really like it so much. It is an excellent movie. It's strange, surprisingly woke for its day. And the funny part about it is, like, I think if you ask Bob Clark, which I think he's dead now. I think it was a car accident, sadly. I don't think he would have thought of himself that way. Back to the fact where he even was like, yeah, it wasn't really a feminist subplot. It was just a subplot that we had for the character, you know? But it was, I'm very woke, and it's a good movie. It's a good horror movie.
I was gonna say, and whether they intended it or not, it does have a lot of feminist leanings, and even to the fact that there are so many female characters and all of them have at least something of a personality and that's something you didn't see a whole lot. Like, they're all very individual women. They're not like cookie cutters of each other even. It's an interesting thing to watch. I
Their
liked it.
characters exist outside of a connection to a male.
Yes.
Honestly, even Jess, because she has a very much personality of, I know the things that I want to accomplish. I have an agenda.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, Bob Clark and his son were killed in 2007 in a car crash, and drunk driver drove into them head on, which is horribly tragic. And yeah, so but just yeah, so that's my final thought. Watch this movie if you haven't seen it already. Definitely watch it. If you have seen it already, give it a rewatch and see what you see in it. And yeah, if you got time, because if you're crazy like me, I love compare and contrast. Pop up the 2006 one. It's streaming almost on several platforms for free as well. 2019 is a little harder one to find right now for free. If you go onto the Roku app or whatever and put it in there, it'll say it's here, and you'll click on it. It'll take you to the 2006 and the 1974 one. Don't know why. That's just what it's doing. It is playing on FX right now, I think. So if you have that channel, maybe you can find it on demand. You can obviously rent it, but this is definitely worth a rewatch. The 2006 one's a little iffy to me, but I think it's worth the watch just so you can see where they evolved it from. The 2019 one is like, parts of it are just off the wall weird, but I think you'll love it for where it took the wokeness from the 74 one and they just brought it home. So yeah, watch all three of them if you get a chance, but definitely watch this and pay attention to the cinematography and how he treats the women in it. And it's amazing.
Oh yeah. And if you're one of those people who's a contrarian, which I'm a bit, and want to watch the Christmas movies that aren't like Christmas movies at Christmas time, because I do that too, this is a great one to add to that list with Die Hard and some of the other not Christmas movies, Gremlins. Let's get them all in there. The ones that are set at
First
Christmas
Blood.
but aren't Christmas.
First Blood, Christmas movie, Trading Places, Christmas movie.
Yeah. All the not Christmas movies. Get them in there. Get them in there because this one's fun. It's a good one to add to your not Christmas list.
With that, thank you, everyone. This was Girls Go Schools, and we were talking about Black Christmas 1974, in case you lost the plot with us going all around.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools Podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools Podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.